And we went to GP Bologna, and I 9-0 day one. And I was like, holy, it's probably my crowning achievement of 3.5, 4 months into the format and 9-0ing day one. It was insane, James. It was absolutely insane. I had the best time. I was like, how'd you ever lose? Literally, how'd you ever lose? And I was completely sold. And I think that every Magic player needs that moment. Whatever decade it may be, I was in love. I was absolutely in love.
The following is a conversation with Sahar Mirhadi, Magic player, games researcher, and founding member of the European Legacy Masters Invitational Series. Enjoy. Sahar, it's a pleasure to have you here. How are you?
I'm very well, James. I'm so excited to be here and just talking about Magic, talk about Legacy, just have a chat. I'm looking forward to it.
Just talk about your life, talk about everything you are. I'm looking forward to as well.
Me too, me too. I can tell you my life story from day one to day now. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. I have a lot to... I feel like the people who will watch this and listen to this will see me in one way, but then actually when we start chatting realise that I'm a multifaceted human being with lots of different interests and different things I do outside of just loud Magic player.
Yes.
So.
But I do want to start off by introducing you by your tagline. Like, you have a little thing on your Twitter bio which says, do you want to explain what that is? Because I think even our friend Julian Knab mentioned this when he mentioned that I should reach out to you, like that you have a certain reputation, right?
What can be heard before being seen. So yes, this actually started when I was in university, of my friends being able to hear me across campus because of the way that we were on a hill. The campus was on a hill, and at the bottom of the hill is where I was, and my friends could hear me on the top of the hill. So this has just kept going, and then when I've been to Magic events, people always go, I can always hear you before I see you. So I'm like, okay, well, let's just use this as a general moniker for life. And yeah, it's really useful. My husband can always know where I am. My friends can always find me. There is definitely friends who, especially when I've been to like big events, will be looking for me and they can just zone in on my voice and they're like, she's there. And that's really useful. So I'm happy to have it. Sometimes people think that means that I am just like super loud constantly. No, it's just I have from years of working in sales and doing stand-up, which I did before Magic, I've learned to my voice can just carry. I've just learned over the years just to keep it that way. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes people go, you know, you're very loud. I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm now at the age where I'm old enough to not really care about what you think anymore and just go, cool. Yes. I am who I am. But I'm glad the reputation precedes me.
So it sounds like you've fully leaned into it, right? It's just not apologetic at all. Not that there's something to apologize for, no. But it's just that's who you are.
Yeah, that's who I am. I'm not gonna. Again, James, I've now 35, heaven forbid, and I've got to the age where I'm like, I'm not gonna change for you to feel like it. Obviously, if it's genuinely, if someone comes up to me, like if I'm playing, for example, and they're like, can you like not talk as much or like not be as loud? Of course, I'm gonna respect their space. But if someone is just like comes up to me like randomly, it's like, oh, you're really loud. I'm like, well, firstly, who are you? Yeah. And secondly, why does that bother you? You can just walk away.
And thirdly, to use a British term, sod off. Is that
sod off. Yeah, buzz off. Yeah, like buzz off basically. Again, but the majority of the people that I interact with find it quite endearing, and they're like, oh, just never change. So I like it.
Were you always super extroverted, or were you like that as a child, or when you were young?
Yeah. That's basically my modus operandi. Yes, I was always the extroverted child, needing attention, like kind of wanting attention. And as I've gotten older, I was a lot louder when I was younger. I've sort of tapered over the years, but definitely now, I am happy with the energy that I have. And it goes up and down. Like we can talk. We can talk about mental health later, I'm sure, and like. I've had struggles with it, and I definitely do this sometimes, but majority of the time I'm happy in the skin that I am now in, and I don't want to change for people so they feel better about themselves. Like, I'd rather just be happy in my own skin, and I'm working on myself as a person to kind of, all those voices that go, you're not good enough or whatever, or like, you're too loud, just buzz off, just shoot, and just be happy in my own skin, which is basically, the Magic community has definitely like contributed to that in a both good and bad way, and we can get to that, but I'm happy where I am right now, and it's a journey. Like, I'm never going to stop learning and bettering myself, but where I'm at right now, I feel like I'm in quite a happy place in terms of where I want to be, both as a player, but also as a researcher and just a general good human. Just good humans. Be good humans. Don't be a dick. Please. I beg you.
For sure. Were you born in the UK? Like,
Yes.
I take it that your heritage is Iranian, right?
Yes. So I was born here, and then I moved to Iran when I was 4. And then we came back when I was 7.5, 8. So I did my primary education predominantly in Iran, and spoke fluent Farsi and all this sort of stuff, and then came back in my year 3 in primary school, which was like middle of primary school, and then did primary and secondary education and the university here. So I've not been back since like 99, which is sad, because I have my Persian heritage is very important to me, but it's not something that I can explore it with my friends in terms of food. Like, I've taken lots of my friends to Persian restaurants and stuff like that, and when I got married I had Persian elements to my wedding, but I want to take my husband to Iran, but because of like the penal codes and like citizenship, I am technically a Persian citizen. So if I went back, they'd be like, why don't you have an Iranian passport? Why are you married? Why are you back? So unless I changed my name fully and changed it, took my husband's name and did all that, then it's a bit tricky. But it's a beautiful country. And I've told people who are avid travelers, adventurous travelers, to go to Iran. I've said it many times, going to Iran is a beautiful country. There's a lot of culture. There's a lot of good food. The people are lovely. If you can separate people from government and culture from government, yeah. Iran's one of the most beautiful places on earth. And I would love to go back one day, because I think it is a part of me that is, I don't think about as often, but I'm it is a part of my identity and who I am.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But maybe it's something you alluded to just now, but Iran is also politically volatile, right? I'll put it that way. It can be challenging, yes. if you're of that background and you go back. I feel like everyone I've talked to who's from Iran, they love their country, but it's just difficult. It's a challenging situation, right?
Yeah, and I'm somebody, because I was brought up with sort of Western values, and to a certain extent, even though I have Persian kind of values as well and kind of ways of thinking, it's hard. I would say something silly. I wouldn't want to wear a hijab, and I would probably get myself into trouble. I mean, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there was a case of a British Iranian lady called Nazanin Ratcliffe, who was put in jail for basically, the Iranian government thought she was a spy, and then there's back and forth with the British government and the Persian government to let her out, and after 2 years she was basically let out. But I have those fears, go there and I'll be they look at my name, they'll see I've got a proper Iranian Sahar Mirhadi is as Iranian as name as it gets.
Yeah.
So I'd have to change my name, which I didn't want to do when I got married, because I like my name, it's my identity. They'd be like, oh, excuse me, madam, you're basically here. And also just dealing with Persian bureaucracy is bad enough. I thought English bureaucracy was bad. Persian bureaucracy is a whole nother level. It's I know Iranian people, it is the whole thing. But I'm fortunate enough that my family, we have still some of that present. It's not as fully present, because my mum, my parents got divorced when I was 10. My mum married an Englishman. So there is still some of that there, but I was brought up predominantly kind of British and kind of with the British way of thinking. But I love Persian food. I wanted, like I said, Persian elements to my wedding. We had like a Persian ceremony, which is very spiritual. It's like lots of kind of things to symbolize parts of marriage. And so that part of it I feel connected to, but the kind of bad stuff, I'm just like, ugh. But I have family still there. And I have family in America. Like, Iranians are everywhere. Like, genuinely, anywhere in the world you go, you'll find an Iranian person. It's like, for a country of like a few million people, like I think like 30, 40 million, we're everywhere. Just go to, like, UK, there's tons of us. America, there's tons of us. I've met Americans in the Czech Republic. I've met Americans in Greece. I've met Americans in Turkey. Well, Turkey kind of makes sense, but I do. I am planning to see some cousins in the future, and Turkey's the best place because Iran, they can go to Turkey and we can get to Turkey, and there's not too much issue. So I think that some of the cousins who I grew up with in Iran, we've reconnected and we're like, let's just go to Turkey. Let's go to Istanbul. Let's all meet because this seems like the safest haven for us to go. Or Armenia is like another option that we can all get to and it's not an issue. But yeah, I miss that. I also miss speaking Farsi as much as I used to. I don't speak it as much, but I understand it fluently. So I can hear Iranians. I'm like, someone's speaking Farsi? Like my ears prick up if I'm out and about and I hear it and I'm like, ding.
Are you speaking that within the home as well, like with your family members?
Because my mum married an Englishman, it was a bit more tricky, but my mum and my grandma speak it to each other, as do my aunties. They'll speak it to me occasionally, but I don't think I've lost it, but it's a thing you need to practice. It's like riding a bike. If you're learning, but I think that if you say I went back to Iran, whatever, if I was in Iran for like 3-6 months, it would just come back. It will all flood back because it is a language I learned first. So it is somewhere in the deep subconscious of my brain.
It is inside you. Yes.
It is inside me. It is planning to come out. But it's interesting when you speak to people who speak multiple languages because I find it easier to understand like the general gist of other languages. So I get like a basic understanding of German or a basic understanding of French because you understand how words come together and how you put sentences and the way that they've done stuff. So I'm always okay when I'm on holiday because I can be like, oh, that means this street. Okay, I can understand. Or like this is.
So you're pretty talented with languages, right? How many languages do you actually speak or have some degree of fluency in?
So probably English and Farsi is the main two, and then I can basic German. I can kind of get by, and basic French. But like when I mean basic German and French, like I did German at like A level, and it was like okay. But yeah, they're like basic level. But like Farsi and like English is fluent, and then Farsi is proficient. Like I can understand, I can talk back if I can kind of give me a minute to like put everything back together. Yeah, so yeah, I'm proficient in Farsi and then fluent in English. Those are like my two main ones, and then the other two, French and German, kind of come and go. But those are the two I probably would put if I had to write something down. Or like those two, probably there. So yeah, language is a weird one. Like I find it fascinating when I hear other people speak languages. Having been to Italy for the Four Seasons events quite a lot, and it's just seeing animated Italians, and I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of understand like the body language. I'm like, oh, and I'm like, okay, everyone is as excitable as I am. This is even for me, that's too much. But it's good. I enjoy it.
I'm very envious. I wish I had better affinity with languages. So I grew up in Canada. Actually, my first language was Mandarin because I am born in Taiwan and basically immigrated to Canada at a young age. Lots of Iranians in Canada as well.
Many.
You have mentioned, yes. I know quite a couple of Sahars as well in Canada. But growing up in Canada, it was like I learned English very quickly. Unfortunately, like the 5 years of French I had in high school, like I could never go back to it. Like I'm just so terribly out of touch, out of whatever you want to call that with the language, so I can never recover. So really I only have two languages to my name, and it's just like Mandarin and English. And I would like to learn more languages, but it's just really I'm probably making excuses for myself, but it's harder as one ages to learn more languages. Like, you just kind of have to get in when you're younger. It's a lot easier that way. So.
Yeah, I'm the same as I get older. I'm like, oh, I should learn this. Well, it's like anything. It's learning a language, learning an instrument. It's like you
learning a new magic format, whatever it is.
Consider learning new magic formats. But yeah, learning a new thing, it's super interesting. But yeah, I think I have two, which is probably more than most Magic players than we know. Although I find it envious when I speak to people who speak like 4 or 5 languages. I'm like, how do you do it? I can just do 2. But your 2 are very useful. My 2 are like useful. One is extremely useful, and one is like kind of irrelevant.
they are fairly useful, I have to admit. Like, in most places in the world, like, knowing one of those 2 languages, like Mandarin and English, is enough. I think there was one exception. The one time I was traveling in India, and I actually encountered folks that didn't speak English, like, for example, cab drivers and certain people, right? I guess I should just say, because you're from the UK, of a certain class, right?
Yeah.
So that was a little bit challenging, but other than that, I can't really remember off the top of my head like being anywhere where you couldn't get by one of the two languages. So
exactly, and I think that's even when I go to, like, for mainland Europe is like 95 out of 100 you're fine, and making friends this is one thing I like about Magic, is that in most countries, I'd say, certainly in mainland Europe and probably around the world, knowing someone and just kind of like knowing you have access to that language, you have access to that culture, is so useful. It's just like, I can generally go most countries around, like a good majority of countries where Magic is played, and know I'll be okay, which is an incredible feeling to know that you are part of something bigger. This is something I'm very passionate about, this idea of like the gathering, which is why, like, to kind of bring it back to kind of me playing Legacy, I had a gap during the pandemic, and that was genuinely, I wasn't playing online, I wasn't doing anything, I was just playing casually with my partner. And that was really tough. That was like super tough, especially because I just got into Legacy at that point and was like really like getting into the swing of it and like loving the format. And then I just had to stop because I wasn't working. I'll tell that story because I think it's quite an interesting one. But and then just having to, like, 2 years passes, and then I'm like, okay, now I can reintroduce myself back in. So I know how you feel when you like come back in, you're like, you missed all this stuff. And yes, it was the pandemic, so it was like quite tough, but it was just like I had to come back to a format, relearn it, and then I was like, I'm never letting Legacy go right now. Unless something dramatically changes, I don't think I'm letting it go. So for me, like, my Magic story is, so I started playing, 2014. My sister and my husband bought some Journey into Nyx starter decks. I remember one had Sigiled Starfish, which I loved. I loved that card. It was like a little starfish, and you tapped it to scry 2, and it was like, loved it. And they were playing, and I was like, oh, what's this? Whatever. And then when me and my husband bought our first flat, as a gift to ourselves, we bought a box of Khans of Tarkir. And we got locked out on the first night that we moved, but we had this box of Khans of Tarkir with us. So we just, as we were waiting for the locksmith, cracked the box, and we played half a box sealed outside our flat while we're waiting for the locksmith to turn up. And then I was hooked. I think I played Teamer because I was just like, red cards, green cards, blue cards, let's go. And then I think
red is your favorite color, right? If I remember.
Yes, red is the heart.
Red, second is green, right?
Yes, red, green, and then depending on what flavor I am, it's blue or white. I am not a black player at heart. Red for me is like, and we can talk about this because I think some people are like this. For me, Magic now is it is part of an identity, but also I resonate with what red is trying to represent. It is about passion, it is about impulsivity, it's about creativity, and it's this idea of just I resonate with that as a color and an identity. And as I've played like red green and like stuff like that, I really resonate with that as a player, as a sort of like an affinity, to want a better word. But yeah, back to playing Magic. So Battle for Zendikar was my first pre-release. Got Gideon Ally Zendikar, very good Magic card. And then I started playing Commander first. My first ever Commander game, my opponent, Graham, who's one of our local players, played Humility and Moat. And I was hooked.
What an introduction.
What an introduction. It was also Plane Chase Commander, so I was like immediately hooked to the absolute chaos that was Commander at that point. And then around 2016, I started playing competitively. I started playing Modern, and then picked up Burn. That was my first deck. I love that deck still. Give me Burn Mirrors. Just Burn Mirrors, Modern Burn Mirrors, or Burn Death Shadow. When you had Team of Battle Rage, so tasty. I could play those matches all day long. So I played Burn for a while, and then I played Tron, and then I played Scapeshift. So a full cycle of like life that I went through to play Modern. Very proactive at-you decks. But I stopped playing it in 2019 because of Hogak Summer. Hogak Summer really, I think a lot of players...
You mean Hogak and Modern, right? Which is too busted,
Hogak,
right?
yeah. So the kind of first half of 2019, when Hogak was the deck, and it was everywhere. I was playing Scapeshift at that point, and it was just unwinnable. It didn't matter that I was trying to win on turn 4, and we were both just 2 ships in the night, and I found that really frustrating as a player. Yes, from the decks I have mentioned, they are very proactive linear strategies, but I appreciated interactivity. I did like, sometimes you are 2 ships passing the night, and that's fine, but I don't want every match to be 2 ships passing the night. And that for me is what Hogak felt. It completely homogenized the format. Even I played during KCI, and KCI was fine. Like it was brutal, but at least when I was playing Scapeshift, I can at least do something. I could interact. I could shattering spree their stuff.
It also has to do with the fundamental churns of those decks, right? Because I think Hogak is just fundamentally faster, if I understand correctly. Yeah. So
yeah, I just felt completely kind of burnt out by that point, and so that also 2019 was quite a pivotal year. So I had been working. So I graduated university in 2009. So I was the first batch of graduates after the financial crash of 2008. So going into the workplace as a 21-year-old kind of bright-eyed student, there weren't many jobs, which is why like now when I see graduates coming out in the last like couple of years, I feel for them, because I remember being in that environment. And I went into sales and marketing, and I worked in sales and marketing for various different corporations for about 10 years. And in my last job, I was starting to get really bad, like panic attacks, anxiety, like taking time off work, just because I didn't know what was wrong with me. I just knew something wasn't right, and I was getting really stressed at work. And I remember being at an RPTQ just outside London. And I was playing I think I was playing like the classic, like a version of a classic, basically, to qualify for the next season. I was playing standard. I was playing mono red. I was playing like the Runaway Steamkin deck. Oh, love that deck.
I remember that deck. Yeah,
that deck was so good. You just had a great time. Probably one of the best red decks I've played in like the last 5 years, and I don't think it's even close. So I was playing that deck, and I was talking with my friends about how I was feeling or whatever. And both my husband was like, "Well, why don't you find another job or like do something else?" And one of my friends was like, "Your confidence has gone. Something about you has changed. You need to kind of take some time out." And so 3 days later, I walk into the office with my new manager who had come back from maternity leave, sat her down. I said, "I quit. I can't do this anymore." And just started kind of crying at her of just like all the stress and all the challenge of mental health, depression, like really bad depression, really bad anxiety, just all flooded out. And I just was like, "I'm done. I'm burnt out. I'm done. I can't do this anymore." I'm
really curious though. Like, what was it about? Was it a buildup of sales and marketing roles over several years in roles, or was it like that specific?
No. It was several years. So the job before that, I was working. I was working for a well-known sort of information house, sort of like, you know, data and, you know, sort of these information companies, like software as a service. And I was going for promotion to go and do a lot more kind of like strategic work, like strategic account management, basically. And I remember I went for an interview internally and they said, you're good enough, but you're kind of like a diamond in the rough, and I don't know how we're going to train you to be better. So that was bad for my confidence. And then I was put into a team that the sales director genuinely made about 6 people in that team quit or go on sick leave. It was so toxic. Like, when people talk about toxic workplaces, I remember going into the office and just feeling panic attacks. So I left that job. That was like the first like red flag of like, okay, I need to go. And so I went to another company who are a well-known sort of image licensing company. And I went for training in the States. It was great. And I went back and I was like doing strategic account management, which is what I wanted to do for like really big firms, you know, these big banks, these big brands. And they walk in, and this is like 3 weeks before Christmas. They hand me a spreadsheet of all the companies that owe us money and say, can you call them and ask for our money back? And that was my first introduction to my new client base. And I was like, oh, okay. And so that then led to a cycle of just always kind of going against the grain. In the entire time I was at that company, which probably made me quit, I was in the middle of a finance, I'm not going to call it scandal, but like a finance issue that scarred the entire relationships of everyone else I was working with. Because it wasn't known, but it was like one of my biggest clients, and it was constantly a thing I had to worry about, and the bureaucracy, and it was all this kind of stuff. And I was just like, you know what, I'm done. Like, no one's appreciating me, the work I've put in, the time I put in, the care. Something that about me I realized as I get older is I care a lot. And that for me was like, I couldn't do it anymore. I was like, I'm done. So I finished.
I think sometimes like corporate environments, sorry to interject, but it's like, because it's really resonating with me. Like sometimes the work environments require you to be almost like sociopathic to some degree. Like, you have to remove the caring aspect of your role to be effective, quote unquote. And I think that's difficult to reconcile sometimes.
Yeah. And I definitely did some good work there, but I think as well, that plus the challenge of my manager for majority of the time I was at that company being on maternity leave, and then coming back for like the latter half when I was already burnt out, and my team being gutted, then made bigger, then gutted, and I'm just like, okay, this is done. So I then quit in I quit in March of 2019, and my best friend at the time was traveling the world, and she was in Australia, traveling up the Gold Coast, and I phoned her. And I'm like, yo, I've quit my job. And she's like, oh my God, that's amazing. What are you going to do? I was like, where are you? She said, I'm in Australia. I said, can you be in Sydney in like 3 weeks? She said, sure. And so I booked my flight to Australia for a month. I went to GP Bilbao between. So I basically went to GP Bilbao with some friends, and then went to Australia for a month, traveled between Sydney and Melbourne. I went to Uluru. It was amazing. And then came back, and I was getting married in August. So a lot happened between that 2019 and the week, 2 weeks before I got married, I went to GP Birmingham. This is when I basically stopped playing Hogak, or when I stopped playing Escape Shift. And a friend of mine called Theo, he'll appreciate the shout out. I said, mate, I don't want to play mod anymore. It's horrible. It's like, why don't you play Legacy? I'm like, oh, it's always like a boys club format. It's always really inaccessible. It's so expensive. But I had a friend who had cards, and I was like, he said, why don't you play Nick Fit? I was like, what is Nick Fit? And he's like, oh, it's like Veteran Explorer and Cabal Therapy. I'm like, oh, that sounds quite fun. Because I played Commander. I'd played Veteran Explorer before, but I didn't realize about Cabal Therapy. So we just played Nick Fit mirrors for the entire rest of the GP I'm there, because I was just doing side events. And I was hooked. I was completely hooked. And then my friend, a friend of mine, Tom, had the cards for Delver, because I was like, okay, what deck am I actually going to play to learn the format? And everyone said Delver. Learn to play Delver. Delver has a good way of learning the format, and I actually still think this is true most of the time. So I picked up Rug Delver, and if you remember, Rug Delver at that point was probably the best thing you could be doing, because you had Ren in 6 and you had Oko, and I was hooked. James,
that's when you got in. Yeah, that was probably the peak of Rug Delver. Yes.
I had the best time. I was like, how'd you ever lose? Literally, how'd you ever lose? And I was completely sold. And I think that every Magic player needs that moment, whatever decade it may be. I know a lot of Magic players kind of felt that was like a bemoaned time. But as a new player, I was in love. I was absolutely in love. Ren in 6 was amazing. Just who cared? Wasteland. Just who cared? I played Magic, and then GP Bologna was coming up, so I went to GP Bologna, and then Ren in 6 gets banned 10 days before you go, and you're like, oh my god, Ren in 6 got banned. All right, let's just put a Silver Library and a Fire Ice into my Rug Delver deck. It'll be fine. We still had Oko, and we went to GP Bologna, and I 9-0 day one, and I was like, holy! Firstly, it's one of my after winning one of my most recent tournaments, it's probably my crowning achievement of 3.5, 4 months into the format and 9-0ing day one. It was insane, James. It was absolutely insane. I went 0-6 the next day, but we don't talk about that.
That's okay. You still win 9-6. That's
I still went 9-6. It's still a thing. Funny enough, Anurag, when I was on his podcast... This
is Anurag Das, right?
Anurag Das. Anzi, good guy, Anurag Das.
MTG. Yes.
I love him. And... making sure the coverage still comes to you anywhere in America. So Anurag Das, so Anzi, when I was on his podcast, said that he had my round 10 text coverage that he wrote, because I played against Tristan Potzel, who came second in the event, and he was playing what basically was the progenitor of what would have become Bug Snowco. So it was like Arkham's, it was like Astrolabe, Ice Van Quattle, Leovold, Tireless Tracker, Meekstone, and I was completely out of my depth. But that match, I read back the notes about it, and I look at that match with like quite fond memory of like, yes, it was absolute schooling. Mm-hmm. But I think every Magic player needs that match, because every Magic player needs to have that moment of like, oh, you did well, and that's amazing. But now you've hit someone who is more proficient, more skilled, and that's okay. Like, it's okay to feel like I felt very out of my depth, and then it trickled into the rest of the day. And also it's just not a good matchup. Oh God,
what I remember playing back
horrible.
then is probably one of your worst matchups.
Exactly. So. I was trying to avoid it the entire day. But I have actually, talking of the 9-0, I do have some quite funny stories. I have a funny story and then I have a heartwarming story. So we'll do the funny one first. First time on table one, humble brag. I am facing a Chinese player. I don't know who they are. Shake hands. Hello, how are you? And I'm playing my deck. They play like so. Before when I got into Legacy, everyone was talking about Charlotte's Bug and how Charlotte's Bug was the best thing to be doing back in the day, and it was incredible. And everyone's playing like dark, Baleful Strixes and Shardless Agents or whatever. So my opponent plays a Baleful Strix and a Shardless Agent to get another Baleful Strix, and a Cavern Harpy. Now, hold that thought. And I'm there, like, doing whatever. I beat him 2-0, but I say quite loudly, I think in game 2, it's so nice to see Shardless Bug on the top tables, doing well, being 4-0, and just like completely unawares of what's happening. So I win the match 2-0, shake his hand, do the slip. My friend George behind me peers down, whispers in my ear, Sahar, you played against the Lurin, you never saw an Lurin in 2 games. And I felt so bad. I was like, oh God, now I know it's a Lurin. But at the time, you're 3 months into the format. You don't know the variety of, I knew like Show and Tell and Delver and Reanimator and like Death and Taxes and Shadow and stuff, but I didn't know Allurin, so I was completely unaware.
Well, that's okay, right? I mean, it's just there's nothing malicious about that. You're just kind of in the moment, and you were excited or excitable, and you just spoke it out loud, right? Just kind of like you said, leaning into your personality, right?
Exactly. So I was completely like unawares. I thought it was quite funny. I say it now. And then the heartwarming. It's kind of heartwarming, kind of sad at the same time. But like, so round because you played. It might have been round 8. It was round 8 because you played your first round of day 2 in the same day. It was a long day. Round 8. My friend is playing for winning in of day 2. We'll get back to that point. Top table again, and they go, "Can we do a deck check?" And everyone, at that point, it's like top table. Everyone's around you, and it's quite a lot. I'm like, "Josh, can you push everyone away, please? It's a bit like much for me." They're like, "Sure, Sahar." And they go to do the deck check, and they go, "Sahar, can we see you at the back?" And obviously, I'm running on like absolute adrenaline right now. And I go to the back, and they go, "Sahar, we can see your delvers through the sleeve." And James, I just start, all the adrenaline just pours out of me. I start crying. I'm like, "Please don't disqualify me." Like, because we did the light test, we de-sleeved the deck. So they're like, "Okay, it's okay, calm down. Can anyone corroborate your story?" Now, my friend Theo, who I spoke about earlier, is playing for his winning in for day 2 with Rectifit. So... and he's playing against Cataclysm Maverick. So I'm like, okay, fine, go and, play your deck. They go find Theo. Theo then spends 10 minutes telling him what from the time we left London to getting to Bologna for when we had dinner. Just telling our entire life story.
The life story, yes.
The life, basically, and I'm basically at the back with the French judge, crying my eyes out, like, "Please don't disqualify me. I really didn't mean to do that." Just trying to because all the whatever I was running on was just pouring out of me. All the anxiety, all that kind of stuff just came out. And so they then corroborate with Theo, and Theo's like, "Yes, we came here, we got sleeved, we re-sleeved, we did the light test, we thought it was okay." So the judge comes back and then goes, "Okay, Sahar, we've corroborated your story. We will give you a game loss. And you will have to put basic lands in and then get some checklist cards." So I got some checklist cards for day 2. And by this point, 40 minutes has passed. So everyone is like, "What is happening?" So I'm like, "Judge, as you can see, I'm in a bit of a state. Can I go and wash my face and compose myself to play my match?" He said, Of course. But the top table, the toilets were next to the top tables. So I had to go through the entire crowd to get through. So what I did, I walked to the other side of the convention center, washed my face, walked outside of the venue, walked back in. By this point, 50 minutes has passed, 45, 50 minutes has passed. The round is basically over. And I sit back down, and the judge comes back. The judge is there. Theo has finished. Theo knows what's going on, and I'm here. They go, "Okay, Sahar, you have a game loss. You don't need to sideboard." And... we play our game. I then beat him 2-0 in 10 minutes. Done. He was playing green-black depths. I just vapor snagged and brazen borrowed every Merit Lager I saw. We were done. And I was like... at that point, genuinely felt like I was unstoppable. Because the adversity and the resilience that I had to recompose myself from quite a harrowing experience to then come back and win, I literally couldn't, I felt like I couldn't lose at that point. And for me, that feeling is something I still hold on to whenever I am having a bad streak, or if I'm having something that is kind of a bad feeling. I'm like, "No, you can do this." And it was incredible. The next round, however, I then ended up doing quite a silly thing against Storm, where I tried to force of negation and abrupt decay on my turn. And my judge looked at me and was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I can't do this." And we just wound it back, and we're just like, "You have an abrupt decay, I have a false negation. Let's call the whole thing off." That was also the same game. That was also the same match where I floated a Veil of Summer for about 4 turns while my opponent double Thoughtseize me, Collector Roofed, double Thoughtseize me, killed every creature on sight, and then went to Storm off, and then I had Veil of Summon to not die and then just kill him with Tarmogoyf. So I was like, I finished 9-0, and I'm like, "Oh my god, I feel incredible." And then I see Tristan, and I'm like, "Oh, that's the thing." But I got hooked. I was absolutely hooked by that point. I was like, "Let's go, we'll have a great time." So then obviously Oko got banned, and I was playing Dreadhorde Arcanist, and then, as I said earlier, then the pandemic happened, and then I was like, "Oh, I can't play Legacy anymore. I'm unemployed. I've started a master's, and I can't play anymore." And I think about it now, and I realize how much, in a weird way, I was experiencing some form of grief from that, not playing. I found a format that I loved. I found a community that I was connecting to, and then it was taken away, and I was like, oh, that's kind of sad. So now that I'm back, I'm like, no, this is completely my thing, my baby, with all its warts and all. We will play Legacy until further notice.
I'm just smiling because I have realized unwittingly that I also have used Legacy as kind of a way to process things in my life, even though what I went through happened way before your run. Because I started playing Legacy in 2008.
Yeah.
And I think I got really, really hardcore into Legacy in 2010, 2011. When I was newly single again. That's a long story. I won't get into that. But I suddenly found myself having more time and more disposable income and etc. And I was with a play group in Canada in Vancouver because that's where I grew up. And we just got hardcore into Legacy. I think my favorite deck back then was Zoo. That deck is now extinct. But
it died.
Back then, it was really interesting. That was around the Mental Misstep era. I still remember like playing one of my first Legacy GPs. We actually traveled to Providence, Rhode Island, in the United States from Canada to do it. And I bought all my FPV dual lands at that time. Like I have practically a playset because at the time I was just like, my friend was just like, you should just buy it. You know, like I was like, wow, Underground Sea, like FPV Underground Sea, $100. That's really expensive. Are you sure? I just ended up buying a playset. I bought a playset of tundras, like tropical islands, volcanic islands, most of the zoo lands as well, like three taigas, like plateaus, badlands. So I still have them. I still play Black Border duels. I never got rid of them. I think I still have 6 Mox diamonds from like back then because I just bought them.
You just have so many Magic players that I speak to are like you. They're just like, I bought this
just
like
hoarding them.
Just hoard them. Here's me having to buy my volcanic islands when I picked up Legacy again and having to join the club and trade out of my sell my.
And I, by the way, I'm not sharing this story as some sort of humble brag. Even though like 10 years ago or 5 years ago, maybe younger James was humble bragging a little bit. But like it's just to illustrate like Legacy kind of got me through a point in my life.
100%.
And also it's just I wanted to illustrate how long ago I was playing Legacy in. So and it's really interesting to hear about your perspective too as a newer. I mean, you've been playing Legacy for a long time too, but arguably more accomplished than I have because I've never actually even made a day 2 of a GP. I think I played I want to say 5 or 6, and I was really, really close one of them. But that's one of my life goals, man. Like if I can day 2 a GP, I'll just retire from Magic.
I just want them done. I'm gone. For me, I think Sam Murphy on Twitter was saying about what is your claim you can put to, and I said. My joking one was I've shuffled my hand into my library more times than I think other players have. And definitely in Commander, it's in my playgroup. It's called Doing a Sahar. And
oh my goodness,
it's genuine. It's shuffled. Where's my hand gone? But then she was like, oh, that's like a bit down. That's like a bit of a down thing. What's the actual humble brag? I'm like, one of the few women who've 9-0'd a GP.
9-0'd a GP, yes. And in the history books.
In the history books, and then I posted the Channel Fireball link. So yeah, it's incredible, and I find now like coming back to it, and like as I'm getting more involved with the format, be it playing, be it advocating, doing the ELM stuff I'm doing, which we'll talk about. I think this is one of the most welcoming communities I've been in. It has its challenges. There's definitely, like, one of the things I was actually thinking about in terms of talking with you is with obviously we've had bans recently and people talking about, I think you spoke with Julian of like, Julian doesn't want to talk about the Legacy format panel in terms of like the Pauper format panel. Yeah. And I don't disagree with him, but I think it is probably a thing Wizards could do. If they realise that they don't have the bandwidth, which we kind of can sort of see, then let the players kind of talk about it. However, this is my one caveat with that thing. There is a difference between being a custodian of a format and representing the format in its entirety and being a good player in that format. And I'm using those words very carefully, because I mean, for me, I'd be like, let me be on it. I'd have a lovely time. But I think that there's a difference, because I think there's a lot of players who are very good at a particular strategy or a particular archetype that could be good, but they don't see Legacy as a wider ecosystem. And then there are players who probably do see it as a wider sort of ecosystem, but they don't have the results to back it up. So it's a very fine balancing act. I can see why they haven't done it, because it's a whole thing and it will probably be a challenge in itself. But I think that that's something that maybe in the future could happen. But I find the Legacy community to be very open. They're willing to share their resources, their time. And I don't think I've really encountered anyone, certainly on Twitter, who has been particularly egregious. I've encountered people who probably don't have the best social skills, but that's just Magic players in general. Because this is the thing, I've spoken as a Vanarag. I am very different to a lot of Magic players. When I walk into a room, and both in terms of how I look, but also how I am as a character, as like my own personal personality, I am very different. I am not quiet. I'm not timid. I am, a lot of it's feeling when it comes to how I play, or like I like playing proactive strategies. And that could be that's quite strange for players. Not to mention that I'm a woman of color. We've seen my face now. That's its own challenge in itself. I mean, get into representation in a bit, but it's tough sometimes, and you're like, oh, I'm not like most of the people in this room. That's quite tough. And I am someone who, even now, I'm very passionate about representation. I think I saw you had Jesse.
Jesse Robkin.
Jesse Robkin on, and Jesse Robkin, and you've had Skylar on, and you've had a few female or non-binary players on, and talking about representation and how it being important. And I think in standard and modern and even pioneer, I think that is definitely a growing thing, and the VML obviously advocating for that and pushing for that. It's incredible. The work everyone is doing to push sort of newer formats is incredible. But what gap I see, which makes me sad as a player of Eternal formats, is that in Eternal formats that is not happening, and that challenge of barrier to entry because of cost is there, but also whilst the player base are older for Eternal formats typically, there is still an old school way of the old school Magic player still exists. And a lot of that is kind of going, and I think you spoke about it with Julie in regards to accessibility, not only in terms of availability, like proxy events, which is why I love the work that we're doing in Europe around proxy events and making it accessible for all, regardless of where you're from. But I want to push that you can play Legacy, you can play Vintage, you can play pre-modern if you want. I think it's a good format. I call it Boomer Legacy. It's like in the nicest possible way, because it's like the ecosystem that you all play in. It's very nice. But I want that to be a thing. I want more players of, marginalized players to play Legacy and to play Vintage. But
let's break it down, because you mentioned a number of things. So me, I guess it's my role to kind of break it down, right? Or to ask you the follow-ups. So what, Sahar, do you think is the issue with getting more people that are like overall more well represented into formats like Legacy? Like, can you just break that down? Just what is it? Because I think you kind of mentioned a couple things, but one of the things I heard is that it tends to attract people who are of a more old school nature. Now, you can interpret that as being maybe people who are more old school are a little bit more gatekeeper-ish or more guarded. But you could also interpret that for me is like, well, those people, when they played Magic, there weren't as many female or non-binary players welcome at the time. So therefore, they're kind of like that demographic is migrated into Legacy. So I'm trying to like without it being a leading question,
Yeah,
I really
of
want to
course.
know like what you mean by that.
So I think so availability, so access to cards is obviously the big issue with these formats, full stop. That's like a wider top-down issue that regardless of who you are, that is a challenge. And then I think it is a little bit of the old thing of the social space, and like you walk in and you are not represented. Like even when I go to Four Seasons and I'm playing the main event, there's maybe like 2, maybe 3 women in a field of like 400, and I think the card availability thing is one thing, and I think that is something we will always have to work across. But I think the proxy movement that is happening in Europe is definitely helping with that. And I think it has to happen on the local level. You have to get people to come in, play like proxy events, and then it's like the hook. You get the hook, and then everyone keeps playing. Like in the UK, we've got a growing like non-male sort of scene. Like we've got a lot of like non-binary and like female players that do play, and it is growing. But it's not like tens and tens. It's like, you know, we've gone from like 2 to maybe like 7 to like now maybe like 12, 15, which in a community of about 150, 200 is a good like it is better than some places. So I think it is growing, and there's definitely, you know, the wider movement of push of inclusivity and secure and safe space, like not secure space, but like a safe place to play the game is definitely there. And for me, I'm someone who I just want the kind of passion that I told you about when I first played like Oko Delver, and I just want people to feel that and just be like, oh, this is so good. So it's I think it's probably a bit of like accessibility, both in cards, and then just getting people to just get the hook. And I think that's challenging when you have to say to somebody, oh, you have to spend £2,000-3,000 to buy into this format. And that is not attractive. Whereas if I go, oh, you can come play a monthly event, it's proxy friendly, it's £15 plus whatever you want to proxy up. And then if you want to keep playing, you can, you know, there is one thing that got me playing a bunch of different decks in the time I played Legacy is the generosity of the community. I have a friend who I post about this on Twitter. I have a friend, my friend Luke, who helps me with the ELM stuff, lent me the entirety of Mono Red Stompy and then Initiative for about 9 months, no questions asked. I gave them back to him recently because he's moving. But that generosity to lend out decks and to let people play with the cards, that's how you're going to get people in, and they can start saving and building towards whatever they want to play if they want to, and then go from there. I think the community at large need to be open, not closed-minded. And I think a lot of Legacy players are open-minded and want to, you know, I take a thing from like Benjamin Wheeler with like Canadian Highlander. All a Canadian Highlander player wants is another person to play against with them. All ever a Legacy player wants is someone else to play against them. And I think it's the same thing. I want people to feel like they can be welcome and included. But it's tough. It is tough. And I, as someone who, you know, I try to push that and like go, you know, you can do this and whatever. And there is a lot, there are more female players. It is very good to see that. And I'm happy about that. And I want that to continue sustainably. Not like, I don't want it to be like completely like this and it changes overnight. Just growing the player base slowly but surely. And that's where kind of the ELM stuff came into ideas, which we'll obviously talk about. That's my other
hold on. So I think you're mentioning about accessibility and resources, and that's fine. But you also mentioned something about, you know, basically gender representation and representation in general.
Yeah.
Can you define what you mean exactly by safe or unsafe spaces as it pertains to the environment of Magic?
So I think it is, and I think a lot of players have spoken about this. When I first started playing competitively, there were a lot of players who did not like the fact that women were playing. And I think that has got significantly better, especially after the pandemic. And, you know, I've heard, oh, I'm in the girlfriend bracket. Did your boyfriend make that deck for you or whatever? And
Did your boyfriend teach you to play Magic?
Did your boyfriend teach you how to play Magic? All this kind of stuff. Oh, was your boyfriend playing in the event or whatever? And I know that a lot of both female players have spoken about this. They've written articles. I know a few people who've spoken about that. And it's the feeling of like, you don't belong. And I think now it has gotten 100% better, but what there still is to a certain extent, and I think oh god, I can't remember their name off the top of my head, but somebody wrote about it's the subconscious stuff. It's when you look at your opponent's eyes and you can see that they think they have already won because they're playing against a woman. Then you obviously crush them and then you live your best life. But it's that subconscious bias. Same with like when people are streaming and they assume that their opponent is a man. It's like little things like that. That stuff is, and I have, especially in my playgroup, having like Callum and Francis and like people like that, I still, even now, I'm not saying that, no one's perfect and sometimes they will have cues and stuff like that, but they are big allies. My whole community is a very big ally. But it's like those things. It's the little kind of subconscious stuff that people have just, because they've always played against men, that's all they know. And then they play against a woman and they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, I'm just a Magic player. And for people to feel like, for me, it's like a bit of a celebration when I see different people. It's like, even taking gender out of it, even like the fact that I'm a person of color, like just bringing that into it as well. Like the fact that when I go to events, it's like me and Kai are like the only non-white people in the room. I'm like, just representation is important. Diversity is important. It's nice. So I think that's for me like my biggest. That's the thing. Like now as a player.
But do you think there's an active barrier that is like preventing people of a certain background from participating, or are you saying there's like some built-in deterrence that I'm trying to better understand?
Yeah, I think it is. I don't think it's like a deterrence. I think it is just because it is now. I think Eternal formats are very much community-run formats, and I think you kind of had to be in them from like a period of time to kind of know about it. I think online it is better, definitely with sort of legacy and vintage now. But I think that certainly in paper events, it was a challenging space to enter unless you are. For me, because I'm quite confident and I put myself out there. For me, I just kind of like took that as a sort of like, this is just like anything else I do. But if you're not that way inclined, or I think the reason why things like Standard, Modern, and Pioneer kind of have that, and I see obviously with like the NRG series is a good example of this, and in the States there's a lot more women playing, is that there's a trajectory. There's effectively a trajectory to play for. And people are pushing themselves and like, being like every other competitive player and pushing themselves forward. And the work that, for example, like Autumn did, or Carmen Handy did, or Melissa Tora did, of seeing women and people of marginalized gender doing well and being like the top of their game. Same with Jessie and same with a few other people. You're like, okay, I can do that. You don't have that with Eternal formats. You don't have that projection. So it's harder to get in unless you're already excited by what's going on. Which is, again, why the ELM for me is such a passion project, not only for legacy players, like all legacy players, but if I can get more people to play legacy because this is a thing they can work towards and tap into the competitive spirit.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win. Yes. Win-win. I love it. So, yeah, I think for me, I would say now it is definitely better. It's 100% better. But I definitely still get interactions which I thought would have been gone. But it's out. It is like one out of every. It is like 98% good interactions, and I meet good people. Again, I think for me, because of my personality, like, so it can be hurtful being seen as the main moniker. But the other thing I do is what I call aggressively nice. If you're being horrible and you're being like quite kind of condescending. If I'm aggressively nice, then you're the one who looks bad. So I've definitely done that in situations where I'm like, I am just going to be myself. If you can't handle that, then that's on you. Like, and I think trans Day of Visibility was yesterday. I am very, again, similar to all representation. I think the trans community, it's been quite hard. It is hard for them, and I pride myself on trying to create spaces both for like myself to be welcome in, but also for other people to feel welcome in. And so whenever I go to events, I will try to find people who are not kind of the same white guy and kind of go, hey, welcome to the like, for example, our local monthlies, if there's someone who's new to the format, I'll be like, hey, welcome to the format. Like, if you need anything, let me know. I kind of know a few people around here. If they're horrible, tell me, like jokingly, I kind of do that thing just to make them feel welcome. And I think that's all, for me, that's the only thing I can do. Apart from like showing good results or whatever, for me, the gathering's the more important thing, and just getting people to play the game that I love with the people that I love, and to showcase that is, like, for me, so beautiful. Like, that's the thing underneath it all, is I want people to do, is just to see why I get so passionate about Eternal formats, seeing the joy. Like, the first time I got to play with power, like real power, and just doing the thing, being like, oh my god, I've done the thing. You know, and like, I think a lot of the community now see that and are hoping to, again, I've got good people around me and everyone. I think for me, it's strange, you're talking about like you wanting to day 2 as like your big thing. For me, it was to like do well at a tournament. Like, I know I did the 9-0 day 1 thing, but that was like the start of the thing. But I was like, I would like to win a tournament. I would like to win one tournament just so I feel like I belong in the club. That sounds really strange, even though I'd been consistently doing decent results and like been showing my progress and showing showing how I'm developing like mentally as a player. I always wanted to win a tournament. And then I won the Axion event late February. And for me, that was like, okay, I now belong. My opinions matter. I'm valid in the format I play. And that gave me the confidence to kind of put myself continuously out there as a legacy player and someone who is passionate about Magic the Gathering.
Did you really feel like you had to win that event to have a sense of validation?
Not that event, but I at some point winning an event, whatever it was, you know, it could have been a weekly FNM for all I could about. Just winning something that is got some prestige. And again, sometimes that never happens, and that is fine. And again, for me, it was more just the sense of not sort of a kind of see, I told you so, but there's probably like 5% of me that was like, see, I told you so. And that element of like, oh, I've done it now. I've now done it. I know what it's like to play an event and do the top A and whatever. Yes, I did it with initiative because that deck was busted. But, you know, I had spent time. I had learned that I had done it. I had put a lot of hours into it. And I think that paid off. And I think that's really good. And I think that there's a lot of players who... It's strange. The players I see in Legacy, they're very talented. They are extremely talented. They're very skilled. And they're happy to share their knowledge, and that's great. But sometimes, for me, I am someone who's like a bit of a grafter. I have to like work at it. Some people, like, you can just give them a deck and they know what to do, and they'll like 5-0 a league or like top 8 a challenge or whatever. And again, that's cyclical, and it could be 0-2 drop at the same time. For me, I'm somebody who like needs the deck, needs to subsume herself in the whole thing of it, understand its intricacies, figure it out, learn from other people, and do the graft. And that's in everything I've done in all my life. I have to do the work. I'm not someone it doesn't come to me naturally.
I think we're very similar in that respect. Like, for Magic and also other things, I'm the kind of person that likes to study and read instruction manuals and actually like learn how people play the deck. So to like, I'm not a natural. Like, I feel like every little tiny little thing, whether it's interviewing or Magic, like I had to like study it. I had to study the craft, right? So,
yeah, and I think that for me is something that I feel quite passionate about as well. And I'm very big advocate of coaching, like Magic coaching. I think that's important. If you it's a journey. Life is a journey. And I think you have to grow and understand. And for me, you know, Yes, I have played linear strategies in most of the competitive Magic I've played, because that's the kind of style I like to play. But I played Delver for like close to 2 years, which is very proactive, reactive, whichever you want. Whatever feeling you want to play it.
Yeah, I'm in the Delver Club as well. That's definitely been my
the Delver Discord just erupted when the bans happened. I was like, this is actually unusable. I am going to leave. And I'll message the 4 Delver pilots who I respect and
I love making fun of Sven, who's the admin, because he and I go way back. Oh. And I remember I should have screenshotted all the stuff he said back when, like, you know, oh man, Delver's tier 2. Oh man, Delver's tier 1. Oh man, Delver is tier whatever.
Yeah,
and it's
exactly.
It's funny because I feel like a Delver player complaining about Delver not being, not to pick on him, but like a Delver player picking on Delver not being tier 1 is kind of like,
calm down.
What's the analogy, right? Like, calm down, right? It's like I mean, Nick Fit players only wish that they could be like tier 2, right? Let alone a Delver player complaining that they're now tier 1.5. So
it's like, our deck's dead. I'm like, your deck's not dead. Your deck is definitely not dead.
You're playing the best blue cards, stapled to like the most efficient blue threats. I'm not sure you could ask for much more.
Exactly. Why are you complaining? And like Luca Toselli, who I have a big respect for. It's like, oh, it's not tier 1 anymore. I'm like, Habibi, it wasn't tier 0. It's now tier 1. He's like, I know, but I wanted to.
Don't worry, they'll print another card soon.
Exactly. That's basically what I was thinking. Everyone, calm down.
Yeah.
But I think that's interesting. Like, it's just Delver players boning. I think it's quite funny. But I think I need something to work with and towards. That's why I like tournaments. It's why I like playing in paper, because I have something to work towards. I play Magic Online mainly to test, and to get a feeling for the deck. Or if I have a spare weekend, I'll do a challenge. But I'm not like tight. This is going to sound a bit controversial. I might get some flack from Modo grinders. I don't want to tie my identity as just a Modo grinder. I am a Magic player, however you want to play that. But I don't. So like my Modo username isn't like widely known. Like a few people know about it because obviously I play with friends and stuff. But it's not like I am this person. Like, for me, that's not how I tie myself to playing the game. Yeah. And I don't disrespect people who do, but I feel I am a more well-rounded person, and I have different ways of promoting myself in the game than just...
And I fully agree with that, by the way, and this is one of the things I constantly talk to folks like Julian about, which is, like, it's not even a gender thing. I feel like the Legacy community is, like, just Legacy, like... I find it funny people talk about like being a Legacy specialist, because that's not actually something you should be proud of. Like it's this sort of like self-perpetuating. Okay, now this is me being controversial. Like there's just some sort of like there's this insular nature of Legacy where people like refer to each other by their first names, like Jarvis and Julian, where it's like, I mean, everybody's like Madonna apparently. Like you don't even need to mention Max, there's only one Bob, there's only one Max, there's only one, like I keep telling Julian, like, you got to stop doing that in your podcast. You got to like and I apologize. This is why when you said Anurag, I was like Anurag Das, right?
Anurag
because
Das.
I know it's Anurag, but we should tell people what it is, right? Who it is. And also, like, people have these identities tied to being like, I am a Legacy player who plays Legacy deck X, and I'm just like, dude, is that really like what you want to be known as? It's like,
is that your moniker?
Yeah. Like... I mean, do you want to die on that hill? I don't know what's the analogy, right?
No, I know what you mean. But like, do you know what? I respect the hustle. If you are passionate about a deck and you want to put all your time learning it, all power to you. I think that is important. We actually do need those people in the community, because we need those people who are the bastions. I'm not going to say the bastions of knowledge, but they are basically people who have spent
They're motivated to like develop the tech for that deck, to like write the guides, to make content. Sure.
Exactly. So so if we take, I mean, let's, Bob Huang. What's Newton's surname? I just know it's Hello Newton.
Hung?
Newton Hung. Callum, if we think about Painter. Callum Smith.
There is only one Callum. We
there's only one
Callum.
Callum
Use the last name. So
Albert Lindblom. Albert Lindblom. Matt Brown. Like, I love Matt. Matt's like my boy. Like, anyone insult Matt, I'm fight for Matt. I will literally fight for Matt Brown. We joke about him being like pro Midnights. I actually have a very funny story about that. Matt's going to get annoyed at me, but I tell the story a lot. So when Matt was playing LANs, after the pandemic, he picked up LANs about 16, 17 months ago, and started doing really well on Magic, doing really well at Magic challenges. I think he like top 8'd 2 and I think won 1. And I was playing Delver at the time. And I said to Matt, like, how do I beat lands with Delver? And he's like, put Price of Progress in your deck. That's how you beat lands. Because they can't interact with it, so you will just kill them if you can just kind of like get the thing going. And then, so I put 2 Price of Progress in my deck, and then we played a Legacy event, and I beat Matt with 2 Price of Progress. And so I was at the Four Seasons last year, and I would just jokingly be like, do you know this is Did you know this is famous Modo stream grinder and all-round good guy Matt Brown, aka Pro Midnight's the person that told me to play 2 Price of Progress in my sideboard? And he's like, would you shut up? Just stop telling people about the tech. So now it's like an ongoing thing I do with Matt. But I'm Matt's biggest fan. I think Matt's an incredible human being, and he's doing a lot of good work with when he was doing stuff with Initiative and also stuff with lands. But I think, and then I can go on Sam Dams, Nossman, so Jean, I can't say from his first, Giancarlo, like there's people, you need these pillars, same with Anurag Das when it comes to control, Max when it comes to Doom, Max when it comes to Doomsday, but there's also other Doomsday people as well. Like you need these pillars for people to kind of go to, and for that to be a knowledge exchange. When I was picking up Stompy and J.R. Hamilton, known as XJ Cloud, was playing the deck and was doing quite well with it, I remember messaging XJ and was just like, hey, JR, like, I want to learn the deck. Can you, like, help me? And we spent countless of hours of messages and, conversations and stuff like that. And he really helped me. And I think you need people like that. Thing is, there's a part of me that wants to try and be like that, but I also just want to be like Legacy Player X. I would rather, like, if someone is passionate about that project and they want to build on that, amazing. I will go to you and be like, hey, I want to learn X deck. Can you teach me what to do and the resources to do it? And that for me is a much better relationship with the way I see Legacy. I think those people are important. You need those people. But you also need people who are just advocates for Legacy, which I think these people are. They are like, Legacy is an incredible format, which is why I look at. And
by the way, I want to say the names that you mentioned. Like you mentioned a lot of names. I don't think those people are the issue. I feel like those people are actually at the top of their craft. And to be honest, I actually feel like because they have performed well historically in events and whatnot, so the results show that they're quite good, right? Objectively speaking.
Exactly.
And so when they have something to say about the format, I actually trust it.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm actually someone who is more pragmatic. It's like, if you have results, like I would rather trust like an LSV or like an XJ Cloud who has results with Death and Taxes and Stompy than someone who doesn't and just is just like just saying stuff on Twitter because they can. So actually, I don't think those people are the issue. It's more like it's like, and in fact, I don't think the people who are like the quote unquote well-known Legacy players at the top of their archetype, they're not necessarily the ones who are always like complaining either. I feel like they're actually just developing and trying to figure out like how to address the metagame, and because they're spiky, it's more about like, how do I defeat the metagame rather than just like fold their hand, cross their arms and be like, yeah, this is terrible.
So I'm in this weird spot where I could potentially be the other person that you're talking about, which I don't think I am. I think I am someone who I will show my results, both good, bad, and ugly, because I think something that those other players you spoke about, they only present the positive. They don't present when they go 0-5 in a league or 1-4 or, their deck is doing badly or they tilt out or whatever. And like all the players we mentioned,
guilty as charged. I used to only post my like 5-0 leagues
exactly.
too. So.
And that's something that I think people need to be more transparent about. But the people at the top of their game, that's fine. And the fact that they are always very welcoming and very accessible is also very good. There are players, you are correct. There are players who are opinionated without the thing. And this is kind of why, in a weird way, I know this is going to sound bizarre, but that's kind of why when I won with Initiative, I was like, yes, you have Matt and you have Lee Weber.
Yeah, I mean, it helps build credibility. Not gonna lie,
and I don't. But
that
I'm
helps.
not. But I'm not someone who's like come to me for. I mean, obviously, come to me for Stompy advice. I'm still in the Mono Red Discords, hanging out. There's like 4 of us
Nice.
who still try and figure out why Mono Red is still remotely good, and then Phil Gallagher still like posting deck lists and stuff like that. But
I think he won a challenge once with Red Stompy,
yes,
right?
yes. So he's.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Phil as well. So for me, it's about the wider ecosystem, because there's like all these, you know, people at the top of their game, all these format specialists, you know, these deck specialists, and then there's kind of everyone else who loves the format and wants to engage. I'm probably, again, I think because of the kind of person I am, I like engaging with the system. I like engaging with the ecosystem and going like that. I posted yesterday, I'm like, I feel a bit lost in the format. I'm not an innovator. I'm not a brewer. I'm someone who needs to be given a deck, learn it, keep learning it, iterate on it, and then get better with it. So I was like, sell me your deck. Like, tell me what to play. I'm you know, the initiative deck is good for like a weekly or like a monthly thing, but it's not something I would take to a big tournament or even a challenge. So I want to play something. And I was like, I could play Delver and Mono Red, but I know how to play those decks. Like, give me a new challenge. So I think right now, my top 3 are like Naya Depths, Cephalid Breakfast, and Doomsday. It's probably Cephalid Breakfast.
I am. You like Cephalid Breakfast? I was actually going to recommend Naya Depths. I've been playing that recently, and that's been pretty. It's been pretty fun. It's definitely not my cup of tea, but it's. I enjoy it the few times I play.
I probably will, depending, because it's like proxy. I can proxy it up and play them, but because I've got Francis as access, I can do Doomsday and Cephalid Breakfast kind of easy because I have the resource of Francis to like help me through lines and think of stuff and all this kind of stuff. Naya Depths is one of those decks that isn't played much in the UK. It's very good. It's very, very good. It just doesn't get played that much. So trying to get resources for it, I can go to Douge and like a couple of other people, but like having like, or even Painter, for example, I can go to Callum Smith and Jasper Morrison Bowie, who runs the Painter Discord, and go, hi boys, I play with you every week. Teach me this deck. Teach me what I need to do. Same with any Esper, sort of any blue-black deck. I can go to Francis Scalper and be like, Francis, you've played blue-black decks. You're a miracles person. Tell me how to learn how, you know, play these combo, combo control decks. So I think that I am very fortunate.
Local access, yes.
Local access is so useful. Yeah. But don't get me wrong, I am super, super grateful for having some of the best legacy minds, I think, in the world. And I know they're going to be like, oh, Sahar, don't say that. That's, you know, don't be like that. I'll be like, no, I genuinely believe that the UK has some of the best legacy players in the world. Hands down. Just the way they play is very good. But it's also like done with a smile on their face. No one is like, people are not taking it too seriously, but just seriously enough that there's something to play for. Which is why I like going to events with the Brits, like abroad, because it's quite funny to just see us all just like, hello, we're here to play Magic. And that's, you know, again, like, it's the reason why we kind of created ELM, because I wanted to showcase and grow and revitalize communities to...
Okay, good segue. Let's talk about it. So
I
ELM,
got you, don't worry.
This is your baby. So I heard that it was just recently formed as of last year.
Yes.
Is that true? Give me the history.
I'll give you the history. So
first.
last June 4 seasons. June 4 seasons. So last June, it's my first 4 seasons. Maybe like June, September. It's like one of the June or September 4 seasons. I was talking with Niccolo Cavoni and Tom De Decker and Sam Dams. So two Belgians and a Italian. And my friend Luke Kay, who also helps me run it. And we were talking about so the Italians, James, the Italians love Legacy. It's unbelievable how...
Why is that? Because I'm always seeing 400 6-person Legacy or proper events.
I think because it was kind of the second market after the States. They just love it. There's 30 to 40 leagues across Italy. all of which have like 40 to 60 players in them. It's incredible. But what the Italians have is an invitational that all the leagues across the country all come together as a 64-player event, and then the person wins like Italian legacy champion. And Nicola Cavoni, who runs one of the leagues, it's called the Law League, Banana, represent Banana, and part of the Blue Dojo League, which I think is in Tuscany, I think. I can't remember.
The dojo I've definitely heard about.
Blue Dojo is like probably one of the famous ones that people know.
I have enjoyed their deck lists over the years.
What a wild time to be alive. So I was talking to Nicola and I was like, oh, it's really interesting that you guys have the invitational. Have you guys thought about expanding it? And they said no, but we could. We could invite some people. And so then I started talking with Tom de Decker, who runs the Belgian Legacy Cup, and we all just started chatting, and it all kind of became a thing we could do. And then we came back in September. It was like, around sort of August time, we were like, let's actually do this. So we kind of got ourselves together, got a bunch of countries on board, and put this event on. And we're like, okay, Four Seasons, can you let us, like, can we just, like, you know, just use a blunt word, leech off your infrastructure and you just give us a few tables to run this event. And so we get a bunch of reps from across Europe. We've got like 20 countries all come together, and we're like, let's run some qualifier events for us. Let's run some events. I think we ran 30 events in the 3-4 month period. And then we invited a bunch of guests. So we invited, obviously, Julian Nab, Kai Sawatari, Callum Smith, Andrea Mengucci, Javier Dominguez, Gary Campbell, good guy Gary Campbell.
Grand Prix champion,
an absolute king. So we invited all those people, Mark Voigt and a few other people. And then we had some qualifiers. And we had some qualify events, and then we had a bunch of people come qualify. And I think in the end we had 75 players from across all of Europe. And I did the player meeting, and I get really emotional because I have the video of the player meeting on my phone, and I am very emotional to see what we achieved in such a short period of time, because we were scrambling, James. We were literally scrambling for sponsorship money, infrastructure, how we were going to run events. It was a whole heap of coverage, trying to do it all. But we made it happen. It was a reality. We got maybe 1,500 euros worth of sponsorship money, which was just we're just scrambling. We're just get whatever money we can, whatever prizes we can. It'd be amazing. And then I went on all the podcasts. I promoted it. I helped run the social media. I run the Twitter account for it, and just pushed and pushed and pushed. And it was genuinely one of the hardest things I did towards the latter end of last year. Because I was also doing.
What's your why for ELM? Like, what keeps you motivated throughout the whole thing?
Keep telling myself that every day. This idea of community, this idea of I am trying to create something that is accessible for people to achieve something in. I think is the way I kind of phrase it to myself. I want to provide somewhere for players to. Well, not I. We. I'm obviously talking me, Tom, Nicolo, Luke, and all the reps. Obviously, Tom and Nicolo are co-chairs. I do a lot of the public relations work. Luke does a lot of the sort of social media stuff with me. And then there's Inigo Villamore, who does some of the coverage work. Julian now obviously helps with stuff like that as well. And I think certainly myself, Tom, and Nicolo are very passionate about growing legacy locally, and for players to feel that they can achieve something, because it's not a Pro Tour format. Legacy is not a Pro Tour format. We don't have that avenue to do that. So let's just make one. And I know that Julian did the LPL. I watched the LPL, and I saw what can be done. And this is a huge undertaking, James. Trying to navigate 21 countries, infrastructures and communities. I mean, we have reps to kind of help with that, but because I'm helping with just oversight and kind of seeing what happens, it's tough, because you're okay, everyone does it slightly differently, so there's a bit of room for kind of interpretation, not interpretation, but kind of room for the way you do things. But we have for this year, certainly, we made a code of conduct, we have we have reps for each region. We added Greece. That was our most recent addition, and it's working. It's incredible that it's working, but it's working. And we're in the process of getting hopefully some big name sponsors. I can't talk about it just yet. And the date is basically confirmed. I think because this will come out after Tuesday, I can probably tell you the date because it'll be afterwards. It'll be the 2nd of September, 2023. So that'll be exciting. So I'm looking forward to it. Unfortunately, I can't make it, which is a bit of a kick in the teeth. But
that's a bummer. Yeah.
But yeah, my husband's best friend's getting married, and I think that's kind of more important.
Sure. Priorities.
Priorities, exactly. So it's incredible. I absolutely love it. I love the friends I have made from it. And for me, because it is about community, like doing well at playing the Magic bit is fun and I enjoy it. And I like working as a craft. But the community, James, the community is like...
I'm right with you. That's why I do the podcast, right?
Exactly.
Like actually, over the past 12 months, I probably have spent more time doing the podcast than actually playing Magic. And as I told Julian in our episode together with Julian, like, I'm trying to get back into more Magic and be more intentional about playing more Magic. But yeah, there definitely was a point in time last year I was just like, I have more fun doing this than actually playing Magic. Or at least it reaches more people than me just personally enjoying a match of Magic, right? So just trying to think that way. And I also want to ask though, like, I'm not sure if you got asked this in your other podcast, because I'm a huge organizational behavior nerd, like in terms of trying to understand like how organizations work. So within your organization with Tom and others, right? What's your framework for actually making decisions or figuring out whether to go left or right? Because I can imagine when you talk to reps in like 21 different countries or talk to Julian, where everyone has like their own ideas about what should be the right way. So what is your framework as a collective to figure out all that
what
stuff?
To do? Yeah. So initially was direct democracy, which was absolutely not going to work.
Chaotic.
Exactly. That was direct democracy first. And I definitely got in trouble for overstepping the mark. Now we have task forces. So there is kind of unofficially kind of like a core group of people. So it's me, Tom, Nicolo, Luke, and then a few other people, like Inigo and a few other people. But like me, Luke, and like me, Tom, like Nico and Tom are definitely at the top. Like the buck stops with them.
Sure.
And then you have Samuele Dejani, who does like the main event of the day, does the stuff with coverage and things like that. So we have task forces. So each key area we've delegated to someone to be responsible for that. So make sure that it runs. So things like qualifications, the metagame. We have Nicola Guidi, who is part of Legacy Data Collection, who's the European arm with Joseph Dyer. So obviously having Nicola there for the Italian rep, but also having his data analysis thing is amazing. Sponsorship, which is what I basically look after, and then sort of socials, and then sort of website, which kind of Tom does and things like that. So there's like different people. And then we have quarterly updates where we check in basically on what's happening. Everyone can kind of come in, and if somebody wants to like call out, like request a meeting with a particular like lead, they can do. We have a Discord server that everything runs through, which is kind of currently working as intended. It definitely can be improved, and I know Luke K, who's my opposite number for the UK, is trying to work on that for next year, or like this coming year. And then we as for kind of other things, it's sort of just like as of when it is needed. So it's still very organic. The reps, because we made a charter at the start of the year, because we were like, we need to have something that we can all agree to. So it's a 2-page document that we have. And then I made a 1-page kind of cheat sheet for any new country or any new rep that joins. So of like, please give us your contact details. Here's all the kind of key information to have. Here's our Google Drive, all the documents that we have. So everyone can know where they're going. It's still tough because there's still people who don't use Discord actively, and you have to kind of like coax them out. So I usually once every 2 months, 3 months, I will send like a quarterly like update email of like, hey, please let us know if this is happening. And then in terms of accountability and transparency of events, because we're doing sponsorship and we're trying to get sponsorship for the entire series, not just the main event, I have Tom, who looks after qualifications, is like, you need to tell us when your events are. You need to tell us who qualifies. You need to tell us if you have top 8 like links. If you have a metagame breakdown, even better. Please give us the dates so we are all aware. That sheet, we have a big Excel spreadsheet, basically, which is just like a living document of dates that get added. And I check that probably once a week to see how it's going. And then I have communication with Tom and Niccolo if something is happening. So obviously the date was the biggest challenge, because we've been working on this since January, and we've not had a date because we're having the infrastructure of Four Seasons to give us a date, because we don't have our own venue. I think in the future I would like for us to be sort of self-sufficient, but that's going to take time. So being the generosity that Four Seasons has given us to run this event, unrivaled. Absolutely love them. Andrea Gabellini, what a pro. Love that man. The work they do is actually incredible. So for us, I think that's the way we do it from an organizational standpoint. But there's definitely times where I still probably do too much. And me and Tom actually last year did too much. We both admitted it to ourselves, because we're both organizational nerds. We're both like, we've done too much of this work. And that's challenging, because you're just like, no one else is going to do this, so I'll do it.
Yes.
And that's a bad trap. I felt all the pressure.
It is a trap, but sometimes when things are getting started, you kind of have to be the self-starter. So there's always a balancing act, right? And honestly, if you're doing it out of passion, it's not like someone's paying you to do it necessarily. So you could also justify that as like, maybe I do a little extra just because I know it's a slippery slope, because I feel like through this conversation, even though I am on the other side of the extroversion introversion scale, like I think we have many similarities as I'm finding out, whether it's organizing things or just loving legacy. But I mean, it's a herding cats. Yeah, I mean, it's a balance, right?
100%. And I think that's something that for me is, now I definitely feel like, because we have these task forces set up, they're not perfect, but they are fit for purpose. And I have sort of said to myself, I will work on the things I want to do, which is why public relations, canonically called it. Anything public facing, be that commercially or just public facing generally, I think helps.
You're the face of ELM, basically. Well,
it's me and other people, but like I think the boys are kind of happy for me to be the kind of the mouthpiece, because even though they're very competent and very passionate about what they do, it's nice to come from me. Also, again, I find it quite funny that like it, and also because of the diversity thing, I keep pushing the diversity thing with them as well. I'm like, oh, we need to make sure we have diversity, guys. I'm like, well, I don't know how to fix it. I'm like, well, I'm not going to push that bandwagon just yet, because we want to build the thing. But I have plans for that, for like this next iteration. And
all in good time. Yes.
All in good time. It all takes time. But I think that the group of people we have in the ELM is very good. And then the core people, James, I would like, it's incredible what shared purpose does to friendship. It's unbelievable. Like I can't, like, Niccolo and Tom as a good, I mean, actually the majority of the reps, but especially Niccolo and Tom, because I've been talking to them solidly about this. I would 100% advocate for both of them. They're both not perfect, neither am I, but we all care, probably to a fault, but we want this thing to be a success. Same with Luke, same with Inigo, same with every single rep that does what they do because they love this project. And so Julian, when you talk about Julian a couple of times, when I spoke with Julian was like, I want you to do this, but I at some point want you to get paid to do this. And I was like, I know, I also would like to get paid to do this, but all in good time. And I'm hoping all in good time. And I think the relationships I'm building, and this is where my sales experience has actually come into it, is that I reached out to some quite, big brands in the Magic space. that I felt would see this as a benefit, and doing like return on investment and showcasing the scope of what the ELM can achieve. It was really nice. I was like, I remember when I sent the initial like email, like the top down email of like, this is what we're expecting, this is the amount of events we're going to be running, and then I wrote it down, sent it, and didn't sort of realize the magnitude of what I was sending. I was like, oh, we anticipate about 100 events across the season. And then my brain just like exploded. I was like, what? What did I say?
Very sizable. Yeah.
I said, what? You said 100 of... And then I just messaged Niccolo and Tom in my like private sponsorship chat of like, WTF, holy God, how is this so big? And they were like, everyone, it's fine, it's fine. Mm-hmm. We're basically pulling from the infrastructure that exists. I'm like, yes, I know that, but how are we coordinating 100 of... How are we weirdly coordinating 100 events? And like, that's why we have reps. I'm like, oh yeah, that's why. So it's the magnitude of it is like sometimes a bit wild, but yeah. I am basically trying to recreate, well, not me, but we are trying to recreate sort of like a legacy version of organized play, if you think of it in that sort of like level. And I remember talking with Anurag Das about this, and he was like, it'd be amazing if this had happened in the US.
Yeah.
But it's
that would be a little bit down, a little farther down the road. But yeah, sure. I mean, you should have that vision if you want it like to be global and such. But of course, as we've said a couple of times, all in good time, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think even Anurag said that the challenge, because we're proxy friendly and we have the space to be proxy friendly, and this is actually something I know you guys spoke about to Julian, but I also have. It is the growth of the proxy playtest friendly environments that are happening in European Legacy is the
it's a renaissance. That's
it's a renaissance.
Kind of like part 2 of what happened with Vintage, right? Because Vintage needed 10 proxy events to basically, I mean, it's still kind of on life support, to be honest. And I love Legacy, Vintage, don't get me wrong, but it's like, I feel like you need to study the history of what happened with other formats. And I think you guys are probably doing the right thing, like all things considered, because if you're just letting something arbitrary, like no proxies, like get in the way of the growth, then I think that would be a real shame, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. And this is something I think that's a challenge with when I speak to people in the States. Because they're like, it's just not a thing that we do. Yeah. And
you're not sanctioned, right? So that's like you chose a different path. It's like in the aggregate, I think it's the better path, but it also has its trade-offs. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And I'm not disputing that, but it's part of the kind of widest thing that we're trying to do. And it's like the main goal is to grow Legacy locally, and then the second goal is to crown a champion every year. Like that's kind of the two are hand in hand effectively. And you know how we get to that, it's a way that we do it. But I'm super, again, it is something that I pride myself on being part of. It is something that I'm very passionate about talking, and I've made some amazing friends from it. And I can't say that that's a bad thing, because it's incredible just meeting other passionate people. I am someone who thrives on being around passionate people. If you're energetic and you're passionate about something, we're going to get along just great. And that to me is, I found my people. It's interesting actually, because one kind of a smaller side is, so not only am I a sort of Magic player, I'm also a researcher. I do research in video games and mental health. And they talk about in research finding your tribe and finding a community of people who like speak your language when you go to conferences and publicize your work. You know, there's a common language that you talk about. And I think that with Magic, finding people who have that common language, I mean, broadly in terms of Magic players, and then the kind of the subculture that is the Legacy community, it's so nice. I just wish that everyone could find that and feel as welcome as I do in this community. It's not perfect, like I said. They still have anytime bans happen, everyone loses their goddamn mind. And then people like will say something controversial, and I'm like, oh, can you all just put your dick away, please?
Well,
And there's some.
I was going to ask you about that, like not to putting the dick away that part, but just in terms of
That's what I say to Magic players when they're playing with their food. When when like a combo player has basically killed you.
You mean is it like a double entendre, like because there's a spotted dick, like
exactly. So I'm just like just stop, please. I am dead. Kill me. I don't need to just sit here for 20 minutes.
But my question is, like, because you guys have chosen to go down the unsanctioned route, does that mean that you could see a future or a vision of the future where the ban lists and things like that are actually cultivated differently from the official WotC way? Because it feels like you would have potentially the license to do so if you wanted to go down that direction.
I already feel division in the Modo and paper accessibility issue. I don't want to make more work for players to try and go, oh, by the way, this is not banned. I'd rather, for me, it is about providing a space that you are aware of and comfortable in to play Magic in the rules that it is built for it, rather than kind of going, we can do this. By all means, like Callum Smith does this with his monthly events. We'll do like an unsanctioned, like,
Legacy Unchained or whatever.
Yeah, that's it. Legacy Unchained. You just unban everything and see what happens.
I am a fan of Legacy, or at least Callum.
Yeah, exactly. So Legacy
podcast.
Unchained or something like that. So like, I think that's fun for like a sort of, like a week, like a monthly thing or a thing for Christmas or whatever. But because we're trying to emulate somewhat of a organized play, like road to like becoming champion kind of series, I would like to emulate what players would play at their, big tournaments, or, if there's if Legacy GPs ever come back.
To put it simply, it's probably not great to like create more schisms, like in an already somewhat niche format. And no offense intended, because I'm a big fan of Legacy as well. But it's like Legacy is not exactly the top dog of Magic, and so when you break it up into like pre-Innistrad Legacy or like pre-modern, like it just makes the player base even more fragmented, right?
Well, it's why it's when the Heritage thing got kind of promoted a while back.
Yes, Heritage, yes.
And I was like, I get it, but also no. Like, cool, you live your best life, Habibi. I'm not. If people like, again, because it is now a community format, for want of a better phrase. I like saying it like that rather than it's like dead, And anytime I say dead format, I go long live, Legacy is dead, long live Legacy. That's like the common phrase a lot of like a lot of European players will typically use.
Sure.
And I think that is, we can take control of the fact that it is a community format, and we have people who are interested in this format and wanted to see it grow and flourish and have a bit of a renaissance, even with all the issues that it has. Again, format not perfect. We have what Wizards want to. So why I get so frustrated about bans. I'm like, okay, all right, cool. What do you want from me, Habibi? It's fine. Content creators need something to talk about. I get it. But I think now for the ELM, certainly, having it be the same and mimic what you would do in a regular Legacy tournament is fine. Going back to what we we're talking about with like barriers to entry and accessibility, I want this to be as accessible as possible. That is like that is the reason, kind of why I'm passionate about it, because we can do that. And obviously, if that is, comes into question, then we have to take a long look at ourselves of like, what do we want this project to be? Because if someone comes in and is like, you can make this like a massive thing, we'll give you all the money in the world, but you can't have it proxy, I'd have to sit with the team and be like, is that what we want? Do we want to sell out and just like sell our soul to the devil? And I mean, I don't want to say it like that, but like, I was just like, but like, if someone comes in and is like, doesn't see that vision with us, I think that's going to be quite tricky to kind of like swallow for us, because I want it to be accessible. I want it to grow. I want people to have that option. But again, I don't think that will be an issue, because we are not doing like a sanctioned style thing. It is not going through Wizards officially. It is a community run thing that we can do in a space that we can do it. And until such time as we feel the need to be sanctioned. It is. I am happy with it as it stands. Again, we'll see how it goes.
There's this kind of I don't even know if I should call it a saying, but it's just kind of like a train of thought, which is like organizations are not really truly battle tested until they've actually been through some real shit, or they've been through like extreme adversity, right? Yeah. I think over time, my sense is that the group that this group is gonna like be tested in different ways. Like, for example, with sponsorships, and how to, if Wizards decides to like reach out, like how do you want to work with Wizards, or even things like, you know, in the future, I asked the ban list question, or like whether there's a separate ban list, because like there could be like, not that anyone wishes for this, but there could be a scenario where they print Ragavan 2 and Earl for like 2 mana, and like there's potentially a future where like Legacy is in a bad spot metagame wise, and then you have to decide then as an organization, like, do we just grind this out, or do we go our different ways for the mission, or for the sake of like growing the player base, or like not having the player base be decimated? So I think there's like, obviously there's a lot of unknowns in the future, but it's just like time will test the resolve and metal of the organization, right?
Yeah, so. And I think that's something that a bunch of us sort of realize in the back of our minds, that, you know, we need to, because it is we're doing this out of like love and passion, and like that can only take you so far. So I think the next, certainly probably this edition and next edition after that, will be sort of a test of like what happens, and because it's kind of improvement sort of year on year. So I think for me, my vision right now is obviously what happens in September, and then a full year between editions, and what we aim to do. And then after that, which will be 2024, then we can really look at ourselves as an organization and see, okay, we have a couple of these under our belts now. Now what? What does this now look like? How do we approach this? What do we do with it? You know, if we've had support, great. How does that look like? How do we work within the infrastructure that we have available to us? But for now, I think I am still in that, because I know you've been a sort of startup fan. I'm in that sort of like early stages of startup where it's all new and exciting and everything is just like an adventure, and you're figuring it out as you go along. And that for me is where I'm at still. But obviously once it's been a couple of years, I'm like, okay, we know what to do now. Now what? So we'll see how it goes. I'm cautiously optimistic with these kind of things. I think that's the best way to be when it comes to these kind of things, and then we'll see how it goes.
Right. On that note, I think, Sahar, this might be a good time to call it, right? I think like we kind of went through the entire spectrum of Magic and ELM and all that stuff, and thank you so much for like taking the time to share. And I feel like there could be like a follow-up, like, because certainly I got the same vibes talking to you as I did with Shivam, because like after my recording with him, he was like, oh man, there's so many things that I still want to talk about. But you know, all in good time. All in good time is my new motto today.
It's all in good time. We'll get to it. No, I'm someone who I have a lot to tell. I'm a storyteller. But, you know, we didn't get to me doing stand-up, but when I was doing stand-up comedy, my whole shtick was just being a storyteller and telling funny stories and kind of jokes and kind of interspersed with that sort of storytelling narrative. So for me,
have you thought about doing a podcast? Maybe you should just do one for ELM.
Know what? I've genuinely thought.
You wouldn't run out of material, that's for sure, right?
Oh no, that's true. So with the PhD, because of the work I'm doing, I didn't get to that, but that's fine. But like with the PhD, it's like balancing the time between me as a researcher, me as a Magic player, me as an ELM rep, and then it's like, and then before you know it, it gets further and further down the rabbit hole.
Yes.
But I will plug my husband's YouTube channel, because I can do that, which is Too Sweet MTG. It's very cool. I will send links and stuff like that to you, James. I'll put in the description.
Excellent.
This is his studio. So he does content on Commander and Cube, because he doesn't play competitively. I'm the competitive one. But I have toyed with the idea of doing maybe some Legacy content on that channel, just to kind of play Legacy. Like I had this idea of doing like an A to Z of Legacy and just start from A and work my way down. I was like, let's start with Alurin and then just work our way to Z, which I think was it Ice State? No, was it? How we did have a Z somewhere. Like it was like old, the old like naming conventions for like 10 years ago or something. So that is an idea I've had floating in the back of my mind. But again, it's time to do it with the PhD and everything else. Plus, being a wife and a partner and a friend and a daughter and all the other life things that we'd have to do as people.
These things are important, but they can take up a lot of time in the day or in the week.
Exactly. Yes. So thank you so much, James, for having me on. This was, do you know what? I didn't expect it to go the way it went, but in a good way. Like, I'm glad we talked about a broad spectrum of things.
The best conversations are the ones that never go the way we expect it to. Because like even before the recording, I had like a certain idea, and I'm always happy to be kind of proven wrong, right? Because it kind of goes based on where we want it to go. So I have no regrets about it. So
yay, that's all I want to hear. Let's go. But yeah, in terms of where people can find me, I'll do a quick plug. So yeah, me, Twitter's usually the best place. Sahar Mirhadi, just follow me on Twitter. You get Magic Player me and you get Researcher me. So if you're interested in either of those things, come and give me a follow. Oh, and then occasionally some cat pictures and some occasional good puns.
And people should follow the ELM Twitter as well,
yes,
right?
EU Legacy Masters. We are posting content on there. We will be. We have monthly article updates. We do monthly qualifier update videos. So we do a little like map of Europe and then post where the stuff is going. We are planning to do more content on our YouTube channel, which sort can be found on. Through the ELM Twitter and stuff like that. That reminds me, I should make a link tree. There you go. There you go.
Oh, no worries. I at least for this episode, I'll have them because I already found them, so I'll just put them in the show notes.
No, that's just for me in terms of like future me. I should make a link tree for the
to-do list. Sure.
So yeah, it's so easy. I'll just good. But yeah, so that's kind of where you can find me, and come. I'm quite, I'm entertaining where I want to be. I'm just quite fun. I'm just kind of like, I'm someone who just like posts about my journey with, my life, the work I'm doing, Magic as a whole. Like I'm very passionate about the game, and I want to maintain a positive force. I think that's the way I'm going to put it as for the game, because I think that's important.
Sahar Positive Force. If you were a Magic card. There it is.
That is it. That's all I am.
Sorry, I made some weird hand gestures now because there was a fly on my computer screen. There wasn't any other reason.
No.
Yeah.
Sahar Positive Force is a good name. I think my husband made me a Magic card, and it's basically Delver's Secrets and Keranos in the same card. And I was like, let's go. And it was like me in like my Animal Crossing like world, and it was like looking very cute, but I'm basically just Lightning Bolt, Keranos, and Delver's Secrets in one card. I was like, that's quite powerful. He's like, it's free mana. I was like, let's go. Go straight into my Rug Delver deck every day of the week, which is kind of cute when I was playing Rug Delver. But yeah. Thank you so much, James.
Yeah.
Have an awesome day, whatever you're doing. I am going to go and I'm going to see some ice hockey. That's what I'm basically doing today. I'm going to go see some ice hockey because there's randomly ice hockey in London. There's like one team, and it's not very good, but there's always a fight. So I'm like, it's always a fight. And I'm like, it's like £10 a ticket. So I'm going to go see some ice hockey and have a good day out. So
very nice. Very nice. Enjoy.
You do. Speak to you later. Have a good day.